Hi everyone, welcome to class. This week we're treating summary writing. Summary writing is really important in academic and professional contexts. Summary writing is one of the most frequently used skills in university study as well as workplace communication. Now, as students, you write summaries for research papers, create executive summaries for reports, and synthesize information throughout your careers. So, what's the point? Summary writing is a core academic and professional skill that you use throughout your career. Now, this isn't just about shortening text, it's about understanding, analyzing, and communicating essential information. When you have strong summary skills, they help you demonstrate critical thinking and communication competence. So, my question to you is how many of you have been asked to summarize something in the past week? You would find out that you already encounter summary tasks regularly. So, that's it for what our topic for this week is about. Now, there's going to be a warm-up exercise, and you're going to pause this video and do this exercise. It's meant to engage you in the core challenge of summary writing. And what's it? You have to try to preserve essential meaning while you're reducing the length. So let's try to do this. The task is we have about 25 words on the screen. I'd like you to reduce to 20, 10, and 6 words. Now be sure to follow the sequence. You can pause the video and then move ahead with the reduction exercise, the summary exercise. Now remember that every word reduction requires a decision about what's most important. When you write a good summary, you try to preserve the core meaning while you're eliminating unnecessary details, right? So, and there may be multiple correct ways to reduce the same text. So I look forward to seeing how you do this. When I meet you in the next class, I want to see how you've gone about doing it. So pause the video now and get this done, and then you continue. I believe you can spend about 5 minutes or thereabouts on this task, and then you proceed. Now let's have you go. All right, welcome back. We'll now move on to talk about the nature of summary writing. Well, what's the fundamental definition that we can give to summary writing? It is a shortened version or form of a story or a passage, right? Summary writing is indeed an analytical skill. It requires judgment about importance and relevance. The key insight is that there is no universal right summary. Relevance depends on the purpose and the audience. All right, so summarizing is decision making. You must choose what matters the most. Again, different purposes require different summaries, even of the same text. So, summary writing helps you to demonstrate your understanding of the original texts. Now, the hardest part is deciding what to leave out, not what to include. Because sometimes it could look like almost everything here is great, so what am I going to leave out? So that's the hardest part of summary writing. Okay. Now, what are the forms of summary there are? We have the note summary. Now, the note summary is the most condensed form, and it's useful for quick reference and for study purposes. You kind of eliminate function words such as articles, auxiliary, verbs, relative pronouns. You take them out when you're doing your note summary. You know the way you can say it is of the utmost importance. You just write is of utmost importance. You remove the article there because you can still get the sense from your write-up. So it's like an abbreviated style of writing, right? Now, when you do that kind of summary, note summaries, you're only prioritizing information density over grammatical completeness. You're not paying attention to whether the sentence is grammatically formed. Now, this style is useful for note taking, for your outlines, for quick reference, not for your academic work. So, when you are in class or as you're listening to this video and you feel like, oh, there are pertinent points that she's making, which I need to note down, you have to write it quickly. And in order to get the most part of what I'm saying, maybe you just feel like I can afford to omit certain words. Later on, when I'm trying to write out my notes in full, I know how to go about it. So what would your focus be on? Content words. And what are content words? Nouns, main verbs, key adjectives, not function words like articles, prepositions, and conjunctions. So, in essence, note summaries summarize style for space and speed. Alright, so for example, you can have a sentence like, the students who were studying in the library were required to submit their assignments before the deadline. Note summary would say a thing like, students studying library required submit assignments before deadline. Yeah, so you can think of how to convert a paragraph to note summary format, focusing on just identifying and preserving the content words while you're eliminating function words. Now, another type of summary is the prose summary. Now, for prose summary, it's quite different from the note summary, right? Prose summaries maintain grammatical completeness and readability while being concise. It's the most common academic and professional summary form. It's important for you to use your own words when you are doing a prose summary. Don't copy phrases from the original. That would be referred to as mindless lifting, and you could be penalized for that. So, for tests, for exam purposes, you want to use the prose summary. But again, before you can be very good at the prose summary, it would mean that you're really good at note-taking skills. So, note summary helps you do better at prose summary. And prose summaries balance conciseness with readability. It's the standard form, like I've mentioned, for academic and professional context. You have to use your own words, and I repeat that, to show your understanding. And it helps you to also avoid plagiarism. Yes, because when you pick mindlessly, you're maybe not going to acknowledge the source, and it leads to acts of plagiarism. Now, what's the process emphasis? You have to read the original text thoroughly. That's number one thing to do. Number two thing to do is to understand the main ideas and the way they connect, their relationships. You've read, you've understood. What's the third thing to do? You draw out the most important points. All right? And having done that, you then rewrite those important points in your own words. Okay? Yeah. So many errors, or there are quite some errors that students make when doing prose summary. One of them is that they copy phrases from the original text instead of paraphrasing. So, no. If you copy rather than paraphrase, it would suggest that you have an incomplete understanding, and it would raise plagiarism concerns. So keep that in mind. All right, so these are the forms. It's either you're doing the prose summary or you're doing a note summary. Now let's go on to talk about types of summary. So we have three types of summary: the informative, descriptive, and evaluative. Now, these three types serve different purposes and different audiences. Each of these types requires different approaches and also includes different kinds of information. The way we've classified this is to help you understand that summary writing isn't a one-size-fits-all, right? The type of summary would depend on its intended use. So you have to understand the type because that helps you to decide what information to include. But keep in mind that most academic and professional summaries are informative. That's the first one there. While evaluative summaries combine summary with some critical analysis. So we're going to look at each of them in detail to understand when and how to use each approach. So let's begin with the informative summary. Now, informative summaries are neutral. They are objective. They present the original author's ideas without adding commentary, judgment, or personal opinions. They just present the information as is contained in an original text. They are faithful representations of the original. Your job is to convey the author's ideas, not to evaluate them. All right? Your job is to convey the author's idea, not to evaluate them. And if you're objective, do you remember what that means? Anyone? Yes. Objectivity means no personal opinions, no judgments, no additions. Now, this type is most common in academic and business writing. Okay? Now, let me give you an example of what I mean when I say you have to use neutral language. So, one, you could say, the author argues that. You don't say, the author accurately argues that, because the adjective accurately shows you have an opinion. So you just say precisely what the author said. Or you say, the study found, not the study surprisingly found. No, you keep emotions, subjectivity out of it, because to some other person it might not be a surprising thing. Or the report concludes, rather than the report obviously concludes. So leave out both adjectives and adverbs in informative summaries, right? So when you have controversial content with you and you're trying to write, you can practice writing objective summaries without letting your personal opinions show. The next type of summary that we'll be looking at is the descriptive summary. And the descriptive summary focuses on the organization and structure of the original text, not just its content. Now, this is useful for describing how authors organize their arguments or how texts are structured. You can think of it as creating a map for the text. Right, so for descriptive summary, the concern isn't just what the text says, but how the text is organized. So the focus, like I said, is on structure, is on the introduction, the main arguments, the evidence, the conclusion. That's the focus for our descriptive summary. Take note of the difference. Now, why is it useful to do a descriptive summary sometimes? It helps people to understand how authors build their cases, case by case, brick by brick. It's also valuable for complex or lengthy texts. When you do a descriptive summary, people are helped to understand those complex ideas embedded in it. Now, when we say that you adopt a structure-focused language, you could say things like, the author begins by, now you're telling us the beginning. The first section establishes, good, that structure there. The argument develops through 3 main points. So I'm looking forward to reading the 3 main points. The conclusion ties together Yeah, beautifully written. So this is useful when you need to, for example, help someone understand how a research paper is organized or how a book develops its arguments chapter by chapter. That is when descriptive summaries come in handy. All right? The third one is evaluative summary. Now, evaluative summaries are quite different from the other kinds of summaries that we've talked about. It combines both summary with critical analysis. Yes, it combines summary with critical analysis. It includes the writer's assessment because you're critically analyzing, right? You assess the writer, you judge their work, you critique the original text. It's the most complex type of summary writing because you need to have not just summary skills but also critical thinking skills. So, what's the key thing about evaluative summaries? They combine summary with critical analysis. They include your assessment of the text's strengths, weaknesses, and significance, right? It requires you to have strong critical thinking skills, and this is useful more in literature reviews when you're asked to do a literature review, book review, critical analysis. Yes, this becomes necessary. It usually has a two-part structure. There's a summary component, which is an objective presentation of the original ideas. And then the second structure will be the evaluation component, where your reasoned assessment and critique come into play. So what are some evaluation criteria that you could use when you're doing an evaluative summary? You could think about clarity and organization. Has the author really presented their information in a clear and organized manner? What's the strength of evidence that they've presented in their work? What's the logic of the arguments? What's the significance of the conclusions that they've reached? And what's the relevance of their work to current issues? So by the time you're able to put all of these points side by side, you're really critically analyzing and evaluating their work, in addition to being able to put the points in a pointed way. So that's evaluative summary for you. Okay, I'm going to give you a task now to do. You're going to pause the video and try to reduce the paragraph to a sentence. Now, this is a practical demonstration of extreme reduction, because how can we talk about reducing an entire paragraph to one sentence? We can use this to show how much compression is possible when we have to do summaries but still preserve the core meaning. And that's the point. So, what's the analysis process? I can take you through the process and then you move through it. No, I think you should rather try and do it than I walk you through the process. So you can pause the video now and then try to do it. That is, reducing the entire paragraph to one sentence. And then I'll show you my own process. All right. So let's talk about the analysis process. The first thing to do is to identify the main claim. And in this paragraph, the main claim is that women have a natural source of power that makes them better survivors. That's the central claim. And what are the key supporting points? That's the second thing for you to identify. Expressions like the power is innate. Well, we're putting it in our own words now, right? And say they're born this way. Born this way. We are born this way. So it means the power is innate and not yet fully understood by science. Those are the key supporting points. Then the third thing to do is to determine what can be eliminated. specific details about physical strength, personal narrative elements, for example, what I was yet to learn. I mean, that's not so important to this context where we want to really eliminate a lot of things. So by the time you put this into consideration, compare with what you have and see whether it gives you what you think it should be. So what's the point? In order for you to do extreme compression, you need to identify the absolute core message. If you miss it, then you've missed the point. Secondly, keep in mind that personal narrative elements usually can be eliminated in summaries. All those personal talk, you can cut them out. They are like fats that you need to cut out. And lastly, focus on claims and conclusions, not examples and elaborations. I hope you get that point. I'll repeat it. 3 key things for you to do this kind of summaries. If you have to do an extreme compression, you need to first of all identify the absolute core message. The second thing is that if there are personal narratives embedded in the work, you can eliminate them when you're doing a summary. And the third and important point is that you need to focus on the claims made in the text as well as the conclusions, not just examples and elaborations. Not examples and the elaborations made in the work. So that said, what are the likely answers for each of them? Imagine that we were to, based on this paragraph, have informative summary, evaluative summary, and which other one now? We can go with those two. So what would your answers be for the different types of summary? Let's see possible answers. For informative summary, we can say women have an innate source of power that makes them better survivors than men. That's compressing an entire paragraph into one sentence. And then we have the evaluative summary. Remember, we're making a bit of argument, a bit of judgment there. So the argument that women have a natural source of power that makes them better survivors is weak because it lacks scientific evidences. Do you see the difference? Yes, so that's what we're talking about. Informative summary simply says what's out there. What has the author said? Replicate it, but using your own words, right? Then if you're doing an evaluative summary, you're putting on your critical thinking cap and you're saying, this person has said this, yes, but what's the objectivity behind it? If you don't find any, you put it out that way. Okay, so that's it. I hope that this is clear enough for you. Let's move on now to talk about summary writing skills or techniques. What's the aim of learning summary? Why are you having to learn how to do summary? It's actually twofold. I can say that there is a dual educational purpose of summary writing. The first one focuses on analytical skills, learning to identify and extract important information. It's a core critical thinking skill that you can transfer to many academic and even professional contexts. So if you learn how to do summary writing, it helps you develop analytical thinking. You learn to identify what matters most. And extraction skills help you process large amounts of information efficiently because you've learned how to just be brief to the point. And in professional contexts, if you're able to express yourself in a clear and concise way, it's such a valuable communication skill. Yes, and these skills are transferable to many other writing and thinking tasks. So if you put your mind to learning how to do summary writing, you'll be the better for it. As you proceed in your career, you'll have times that you need to do research paper writing, business reports presentation. You might even be asked to write minutes of a meeting, executive summaries, literature reviews. So your ability to know what matters and what to extract as well as assess them rightly would definitely come in handy. Okay, what else is there to know? The second part of it emphasizes practical application, that is, preparing students for real world communication demands. Now, the point is that modern professional life requires the ability to communicate essential information quickly and clearly, thinking on your feet, both in writing and speaking. So when you have good summary skills, it prepares you for professional communication demands. When you learn to be brief, you see that it helps you know the importance of brevity as being increasingly important, because the world of work nowadays is so fast paced. Many environments, they require you to be thinking on your feet and be delivering. So, like I've mentioned, these skills are useful to you both in speech and in writing. When you go to a workplace, employers value employees who can communicate complex information clearly and concisely. In what situations are we talking about? So at workplace, you're able to write an email, you're able to make a presentation, prepare for it, write a report, facilitate a meeting, anchor it, have project updates, give them. These are things that summary writing could do for you. All right, you know that we live in an information overloaded world. The ability to summarize effectively helps you. A lot of people have limited attention span and they need information presented clearly and concisely so they can pick them and be on the move. So I need you to keep in mind that when you put your mind to this, it's a skill that will help you in the long run, starting from now. So what are the characteristics of summary writing? Summary writing actually requires a whole lot of language skills to be used. It's a complex skill that integrates multiple language competencies. And these are the things that will help you understand why summary writing can be challenging. It's because you need to master several different skills simultaneously. So you have to have comprehension skills, composition skills, and know your grammar as well to be able to situate information as they should be. So, what have we said? Summary writing is a complex skill that combines multiple language abilities. And if you have weakness in any of these areas, it could affect the quality of the summary that you put out. If you then make the effort to develop these skills, you'd be improving your overall language competence. So what would we do? We'll try to explore each skill area to help you identify your strengths and then know your areas for improvement. Now, let me say it this way. Just think of summary writing like playing a musical instrument. I don't know how many of you in this class can play one, but then if you can play a musical instrument, for example, the piano, you know that you need to coordinate multiple skills simultaneously to create something effective and beautiful that will be thrilling to the people who listen to you. Now, that's exactly how summary writing is. For you to do it well, you need to have all of these language skills good in you. And so, we're going to break them down one after the other. Let's talk about comprehension skills, right? So comprehension skills begin with skimming. Skimming is a strategic reading approach that is focused on helping you quickly identify specific information or getting a general overview of the content. It's strategic reading. You're looking for specific information, right? You quickly assess whether a text is relevant to your needs. You don't read everything just to find out whether you need the material. If you learn how to skim, you can save significant time, both in your research and when you're studying. So I'll encourage you to practice skimming to improve your reading efficiency. So what can help you? You can read headings and subheadings to find exactly where you want to get to. You can focus on the first and the last sentences of paragraphs. You can look for keywords and phrases. You can even use visual elements. For example, if there are charts, lists, bold text, those things can guide you. So when you have a large chunk of material, you want to skim, have that skill of skimming to help you get to the portion where you need, and then you can slow down and read that portion to understand the points. Okay, so that's something to do with regards to the skill of skimming. Now, when you read at a glance, well, that's another thing. You're looking through, you're skimming for words and numbers, you're skimming for a paragraph. These are the things you do. You're even skimming to locate brief thoughts. When you do all of this, you're building that skill of skimming. Now, the next aspect after skimming is to be able to identify what is significant or important or even relevant, right? Critical thinking then comes in. It's not just about understanding what the author says. It's about judging what matters most for your purpose. Yes, because at the end of the day, when you're in your academic world or in your professional world, you should be able to decipher the wheat from the what? Weed. Yeah, so you should be able to do that. When you are able to identify significance, it means that you have critical judgment, not just comprehension. Do you see why I say you need multiple skills at the same time? But again, what helps you know what's important or significant? That would depend on your purpose and your audience. They would help you determine what is significant. Now, sometimes you have to classify, analyze, interpret. Now, such skills are things that you can transfer, like I've said, to many different academic and professional contexts. And these things can definitely help you to, improve your reading and your writing. When you learn how to classify, imagine you know how to arrange a file drawer, you sort your research notes, you organize an outline. Your paragraphing will be beautiful because you already know that I need to sort information in certain ways. So if you're reading a text and you are trying to assess it, you might want to ask some questions which are critical thinking questions. Could be something like, what's the author's main argument? You need to find it out. What evidence supports this argument? What information is background and which is central? Now, what would happen if this information were removed? Would the meat still be there, or have I taken out a chunk of what makes this material stand? Right. So this helps you with being organized, planning your essay, and also doing your professional report writing when you have these skills. Now, the third aspect is being able to select points that are relevant to the task specified for you. Now, relevance is always task specific. What's relevant depends on your specific assignment, the purpose, and the audience. You must always keep that in mind. And that's where many students like you struggle, because you're trying to include everything rather than making strategic selections. So keep in mind that relevance is always determined by your specific task and purpose. When you include irrelevant details, they can be distracting and also confusing for your readers. You have to learn to exclude information. You also have to learn to include it. It's much easier to learn to include it than it is to learn to exclude it. So you have to also learn the two of them very well. All of these skills help you to improve all forms of communication. Even when you're talking with people, you know what to bring in, what to say at a time, and what not to say, because there's a time for everything. Right. So what's a relevance criteria that you might want to keep in mind? For example, you can ask questions like, does this information support the main point? Does this help my specific audience understand? Does this relate to my assignment requirements? Very important. Pay attention to the instruction for your assignment. Can be test, exam. What have you been asked to do? Do not do things outside of it. Another question, would removing this change the essential meaning? Because like I said, you must know what to exclude as much as it's important to know what to include. Now, what's one error students usually make? They would always want to include interesting but irrelevant details that cause distractions. Yes, it's very interesting, but the point is, does it matter to the task at hand? You must always be able to decipher that so that you're doing it right. Another aspect has to do with understanding how tests work, not just what the individual words mean, but how they connect to create meaning. If you have this skill, it's essential for understanding complex academic and professional tests, right? Yes, you know the meaning of words, but you must also know how they work together. Because tests create meaning through relationships and connections between ideas. They do. If you recognize organizational patterns, it will help you to understand and summarize more effectively. Now, what are the relationship types to identify? We talk about cause and effect, right? So because X happened, Y resulted. You must know that. Then when you talk about time sequence, you're saying first, then finally, that's time sequence. Logical order, you're talking about additionally. However, therefore, we're adding logic to the write-up. How about comparison? Similarly, in contrast, those are transition markers that you can, or linking words that you can use to show all of this. Right? So when you have a paragraph, for example, that has clear cause effect or time sequence relationships, show your ability by being able to identify any connecting words and logical relationships, because these are the kind of things that you'll be needing to use when it's time for you to do your work. Also, we then go to composition skills. We're done with comprehension skills. Now we're talking about composition skills. And under composition skills, the first one there is conciseness or precision. Now, composition skills generally refer to the ability to express your understanding clearly and concisely, because those skills will help you effectively determine how you can communicate your summary to others, right? Good comprehension must be paired with clear expression. Conciseness means eliminating unnecessary words while you're preserving meaning, right? That's what it means. Cut the fat. Remove verbose expressions. They do not do anything for you, same as redundant expressions. Now, for clarity, you know, don't you, that it is more important than complexity or impressiveness. You do not need to impress anybody. You don't. All you need to do is be clear. Good organization also helps readers follow and remember your summary. Now, what are some composition challenges? One is precision. Some don't know the right words to use. That can be a problem. Now, the second one is conciseness. Some say more, or some do not know how to say more with fewer words. But when you learn the art of concision, you know how to say more with fewer words. When you learn the art of precision, you know how to choose exactly the right words. When you learn the art of clarity, you learn to make meaning immediately apparent. Someone doesn't have to read and read and read to decode and decipher what you're saying. You learn to make it clear. When you have the skill of organization, it helps you to arrange your ideas logically. We see the smooth transitioning from point A to B to C to D and so on. Now, what are some quality check questions for you? Can I say this more briefly without losing meaning? That's something you want to think about. Can I say this more briefly without losing meaning? Will my intended audience understand this immediately? Will they? Are my ideas arranged in a logical order? If you're able to answer these questions and your answer is all positive, then you know you're doing well. Okay? What's more, the third part is grammatical usage skills. Listen, a good summary is likely to be a judicious blend of the original author's phraseology and phrases of your own. That's what is called word economy. Summary writing requires technical accuracy alongside comprehension and composition skills. So somebody can have excellent ideas, but those can be undermined by grammatical errors or inappropriate vocabulary choices. So the level of technical accuracy you have affects your credibility and clarity. You must then build your vocabulary. If you have to do prose summaries, you have to learn to write complete sentences, not fragments, not note summaries. Okay? You have to also learn the art of proper punctuation. Punctuation is coming up again. And I've always said this to you, whatever we've talked about before, we keep building on it. So you can't afford to be missing out at any point. Why is proper punctuation necessary? Because you don't want to confuse your readers. You want them to understand the meaning that you're assigning to a text. Additionally, use of your own words helps to demonstrate that you understand the text, and that helps you to avoid plagiarism. So you're not copying hook, line, and sinker what the author has put there. And from what I've said so far, you can infer that common grammatical issues in summaries include sentence fragments, run-on sentences, unclear pronoun references. You use pronouns and we don't know who you're referring to or what you're referring to. Some use incorrect verb tenses, punctuation errors. These are things that spoil your summary writing. Now, what are some vocabulary considerations that you need to have? Use words that you understand completely and choose precise rather than impressive words when writing your summaries. And while doing this, try to maintain appropriate formality level. All right, so know your audience and the purpose for your writing. Do not copy phrases from the original text. Try to put them in your own words. If you put this to mind, your grammatical usage skills will be top-notch. Okay, what's the process of summary writing? There is a systematic approach to summary writing. Yes. Good summaries only come when you follow a careful process, not from trying to write while reading. If you try to write while you're reading, you will make a mess of your write-up. All right? There is a question analysis step which is crucial but often skipped by a lot of you. Do not omit the question analysis step. Now, summary writing is a process. You have to follow the steps so that you get good results than when you're trying to summarize as you read. What's the first thing to do? We'll see, but you need to understand the question. I always like to say, try to understand the question, the task. That's the first and most important step. Because if you do not know what you're asked to do, you'll be all over the place. Another thing to do is to is to read multiple times. It helps you understand both the content and the structure of the work. Again, when you're reading, excuse me, when you're reading, read with purpose. Yes, read with purpose. Because that will help you than when you just do general reading. So let's look at what question analysis you can do. Number one, you can ask yourself, what type of summary is required? We've learned about different types of summaries. So you have to know the precise one. Don't just start writing. Yes, summary. Oh, I know what to include and to exclude. And then you start to write. No, please. First of all, find out what type of summary is required. Secondly, what length is specified? Yes, because sometimes we give you 200 words, 150 words. If you go overboard, you'll be penalized. Plus or minus 5. I always say that to you. If I ask you to write 200 and you write 205, you're still in safe hands. If you write 208, you're in trouble. If you write 195, okay. But you write 190, that's 10 less. No. So pay attention to the length that's specified. Pay attention to the aspects that should be emphasized. And ask yourself who the intended audience is, so you write for them. Now that's step one, question analysis. You're asking all of these questions because you want to understand how it works. Now step two, multiple readings. First reading, the general understanding. Then second reading, move on to the task requirements. That's where you then focus on. Now, what else do? You have to learn to be selective and strategic in gathering your information. And like I mentioned before about the note-taking stage, right at this point is crucial for organizing your thoughts before writing the summary. Now, when you're making critical selection, it means making tough choices about what to include. If there are illustrations and examples, they are less important than the main point in summaries. But in your essay writing, give me all the illustrations, give me all the examples. But when you're writing summaries, I repeat, do not include illustrations and examples. Now, note-taking helps you organize your thoughts before writing. I've mentioned that. When you organize your notes well, you can do well-organized summaries. So what should you exclude? Let me repeat that. Detailed examples. Unless the task specifically requires you to include examples. Other than that, please exclude examples. Do not include repetitive information. Do not include background information that's not directly relevant. You got that? Also, do not include the author's personal anecdotes. We don't need them for summary situations. Do not include lengthy explanations of simple concepts. No, it's a no. I've mentioned what you can and should exclude. Detailed examples, repetitive information, background information that's not relevant, and the author's personal anecdotes, as well as lengthy explanations of simple concepts. So what can help you when you want to take notes? Use bullet points or numbered lists. Then when you find ideas that are related, group them together. And most importantly, use your own words. Do not use phrases from the original text. And only include information that is relevant to your task. You might see lots of beautiful, eye-catching information. Leave them alone. Just focus on the one relevant for the task that you've been assigned. I hope you get that point. All right. As you select the main points, write them down in note form, and they will help you to show that you understand the main points. What more? You can then move on to draft and revise. Many students try to write perfect summaries on the first attempt, but professional writers know that good writing comes from revision, right? So when you want to do this, you write from your notes, not from the original text, because it will help you ensure that you're using your own words. Now, your rough drafts are meant to be imperfect, so what you should focus on is getting the ideas down first, and revision is then where good summaries become excellent summaries. But check for content, check for clarity, correctness, and length. So what's a drafting strategy? You can focus on content and organization in the first draft. You can use your notes as your primary reference. Only return to the original text if you need to verify specific information. All right, so let me give you a revision checklist. Pay attention to content and ask yourself, are all the main points included? Is there anything irrelevant that I need to take out? Clarity, will readers understand this easily? Will they? Correctness, pay attention to grammar, punctuation, spelling errors. And length, is it within the specified word limits or sentence limits? If you're asked to write 5 sentences, don't write 6. But you can use compound sentences to add many independent clauses. I'm just giving you a tip there, right? Or you can use a compound complex too, if you remember how to create those sentences. But when you're told 5 sentences, keep it at that, so you're not penalized for going overboard. Now, you might want to stay in class and finish up the video and the task, which will not take you up to 100 minutes, and then you can go while you've had your attendance signed. Now, time is always difficult to manage. In order for you to follow the above outlined method, I know you must have been saying, when are we going to have the time to do all of these things that you've said? But the good thing is that if you regularly practice, you will internalize these steps so that you'll be able to do them even unconsciously. Yes, you do them well unconsciously. So just keep practicing, and before you know it, it doesn't take you as much time as it would if you haven't ever practiced. You're not going to do the practice in the examination hall. Yes, that's why you need to make out time to do summary writing. But pay attention to the aspect of careful revision and proofreading. In your rough draft, it's normal to find errors. It doesn't mean you're a poor writer, but when you then do the main work, try to eliminate errors. Even professional writers always revise multiple times. But when you do careful proofreading, it demonstrates attention to detail and respect for your readers. Remember, don't ever submit your first draft. Always revise and proofread. So what are some of the things you can look out for when you're doing your revision discoveries? Pay attention to the thing of unclear pronoun references. Because it hit the ground, or because the motorcycle hit the tree, it broke. What is the it there? Is it referring to the motorcycle or to the tree? Because the motorcycle hit the tree, it broke. What's the it referring to? I don't know if you get the sense. So when we talk about unclear pronoun references, we do not know what the pronoun it is referring to. So pay attention to that. We have sentences that try to do too much. Break them down. If there are missing connections between ideas, look for transition markers, words that will help to bridge them. Do not unnecessarily repeat because you don't have space for that. That's why it's a summary. And let there be formatting consistency. Do not have indentation, no indentation, no. All right? Another thing that can help you is to read aloud to catch awkward phrasing. If you read aloud, you can tell, oh, something is missing here, something is not right, and then you can correct it. Also check that each sentence is complete, is clear, that you've used appropriate punctuation, verify that the summary flows logically, and confirm that you have adhered to the length requirements. What have we said so far by way of summary? by way of summary, what have we learned so far? The emphasis here is on understanding before you write. Okay? When you use keywords, when you underline, they help you to identify what's most important. So you can skim the text for general understanding, right? Then read carefully for detailed understanding. Make your notes using keywords. Underline all important information. Then write, including all the main facts. Do not include examples, evaluations, and interpretations. Do not do that. Now, focus on the technical aspects of summary construction, which will include grammatical considerations and final quality control. Your keywords become the foundation for complete sentences. And I've also talked about the need for logical connections between sentences because it helps to improve readability. People can understand precisely what it is that you're saying. Maintain your verb tense. Be consistent in your verb tense usage because that helps to show clarity. You cannot be using the present perfect continuous and you jump to past tense. Check the work very well and know which aspect of tense is important for you to use. And when you use reported speech, it helps you to maintain objectivity because you're not going to be including your own assessment except you're doing an evaluative summary. So what are some of those transition markers? I've been talking about transition markers. So you have transitions like however, therefore, additionally. Use them freely. For verb tense, you can choose present simple or past simple. Yeah. Then for reported speech, you can say the author argues that. Then you say what you think the author's argument is instead of you making a direct quotation. Then person changes. Sometimes you have to change the person. What that means is that the third person is usually most appropriate for academic summaries. So instead of saying I, you use a third person. She, he, they. That's a third person. And finally, check your spelling carefully. Verify your grammar accuracy. Ensure that there is a logical flow between the sentences. And make sure that you're always paying attention to the requirements of the assignments that you're given. So I now have 2 tasks that I need you to work on. This particular exercise combines multiple challenges. There are extreme length constraints. So we have 22 words. We have evaluative summary type and spot contents that may engage student interest. So I want you to go through the process. You're going to do this on your own. You're going to pause the video and do this exercise. And one thing that can help you is, first of all, try to identify the main claim. Then check for the supporting evidence. Number 3, determine the evaluation criteria. Right? For example, what makes the argument strong or weak? That's what I mean. Then consider the length constraints. So, how to fit the evaluation into 22 words, a whole paragraph. So think about that. And the moment you're done with this, go right over to the next one. Yes, which also gives you practice with informative summary. The previous one was evaluative summary. Then this is informative summary under length constraints. The content here includes health and nutrition concepts that require accurate and objective representation. So the analysis process will be the same. Find out what the main concept is. Find out the key mechanism, the supporting evidence, the constraints, and then you go ahead to do your review. So if you're done with the previous one and you're also done with this, or before being done with it, I guess you have to pause the video and do the task. Yes, all within the same time. And if you haven't had your 10 minutes break, maybe you want to do that and then come back to continue. So when you pause, you continue. We'll talk about the closing discussion points. And this is the key takeaway here in this lesson. Summary writing is a complex skill that requires comprehension, composition, and grammatical competence. Different types of summaries serve different purposes, could be informative, descriptive, or evaluative. Process matters more than talent. If you follow systematic steps, you have better results. And you have to keep practicing with the constraints, the length, the time, the audience, so that you have stronger skills. And on that note, I say thank you for listening. And if you do have questions, send them to my inbox. For now, it is. Bye-bye.